My mother picked up the card that said "Congratulations, Hannah," and handed it to our server. "We don't need this anymore," she said. Then a photographer arrived with people I never invited. My sister Megan looked confused. Mom didn't. 10 minutes later, Megan's boyfriend was on one knee at the table I had paid for. My graduation dinner had become my sister's engagement party. How did that happen? The worst part was not the proposal. It was what my mother expected me to pay for after it. And by the end of the night, the restaurant owner would tell us what she had done before any of us arrived. Tell me honestly, if your family turned the one night you planned for yourself into somebody else's celebration, how long would you stay polite? I'm Hannah Mercer. I'm 33, and I live outside Columbus, Ohio. For most of my adult life, I have been the person in my family who could handle things. That sounds like a compliment. In our house, it usually meant nobody had to ask what I needed. I work as an operations manager for a regional food distributor. My job is not glamorous, but I like it. I like knowing where things are supposed to go, what happens when a plan changes, and who needs to know before the change becomes a problem. At work, people call that being organized. In my family, Mom called it being easy. 2 years before that dinner, I enrolled in a part-time master's program in organizational leadership. I had wanted to do it for years. I kept putting it off because work was busy, money was tight, or somebody in my family had something more urgent. There was always something. Megan was moving. Dad needed help sorting out a contractor. Mom was planning a birthday dinner and needed me to compare venues. None of those things ruined my life. That was part of the problem. Each request was small enough to accept. Together, they trained everyone to assume my time was available. I paid for school myself. My employer covered a small part of the tuition, but the rest came from savings and a very boring budget. For 2 years, my weekdays started before sunrise. I worked a full day, drove to campus twice a week, and did most of my reading at my kitchen table. Saturday mornings belonged to group projects. Sunday afternoons belonged to laundry, groceries, and whatever paper was due next. I was tired a lot. I was also proud of myself. My parents knew how much work it took. They were not cruel about it. Dad would ask how class was going. Mom would text me before exams. But there was a difference between knowing something mattered to me and treating it like it mattered. That difference had followed Megan and me since we were kids. Megan is 4 years younger than I am. She is funny, warm, and much better at making a room feel lively than I have ever been. People notice her. She remembers birthdays without a calendar. She can turn a grocery run into a story. I love her. That matters because for years I blamed her for a pattern she did not create. Mom created most of it. Dad helped by avoiding conflict. When Megan had a school concert, the whole week seemed to point toward it. When I won something, Mom was proud but practical. She would hug me and say, "Of course you did." Then she would ask whether I could pick up napkins on the way home. I learned to accept that as normal. By the time I was in my 30s, Mom had a phrase for me. "You've always been the one who can take care of herself." She said it when I did not get much attention. She said it when I got less help. She said it whenever I asked why a family plan had changed after I had already arranged my life around it. The sentence sounded admiring. It also ended every conversation. My graduation was on a Saturday in early May. The university ceremony was in the afternoon. I did not want a huge party after it. I wanted dinner. That was all. A quiet room, good food, and the people who had actually watched me work for the degree. I found a family-owned Italian restaurant called Bellini House about 20 minutes from campus. They had a private dining room in the back. It seated 14 comfortably. That was perfect. The owner was a man named Luis Ortega. I met him the first time I visited. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with reading glasses he kept moving from his face to the top of his head. He asked what I was celebrating. When I told him, he smiled. "Then we make it feel like your night," he said. That sentence should not have felt unusual. It did. I booked the room about 6 weeks before graduation. The dinner package was simple. A set menu, soft drinks, dessert, tax, and gratuity were included. I put down a deposit and left my card on file for the final balance. I also ordered one small sheet cake through the restaurant. Vanilla, lemon filling, white frosting, nothing fancy. Across the top, in dark blue icing, it would say, "Congratulations, Hannah." Louis offered to print a little tent card for the center of the table. It was cream-colored with a thin blue border. The words were simple. "Congratulations, Hannah." I laughed when he showed me the sample. "It looks official," I said. "Graduation should look a little official," he said. I invited my parents, Megan, Caleb, 2 friends from work, 2 women from my program, and a few other people who had been part of the last 2 years. Nobody from work had to come. Nobody was expected to bring a gift. I just wanted a table where I did not have to explain why finishing mattered. Mom seemed excited at first. She asked what she could do. I told her the nicest thing she could do was show up and let me handle the rest. That should have been easy. For Mom, it was almost impossible. 3 days later, she texted me a photo of gold napkin rings. "Too much?" she asked. I said yes, but nicely. The restaurant already had everything. She sent a laughing emoji. Then she asked whether Megan could bring Caleb's parents. I said the room was already near capacity. Mom wrote, "They'd love to celebrate you." I had met Caleb's parents twice. They were pleasant people. They did not know me well enough to celebrate my graduate degree on a Saturday night. I called Mom instead of texting. "Please don't expand the guest list," I said. "I'm not trying to be rude, I just want this small." She sighed. "You're making it sound like a state dinner." "No, I'm making it sound like a reservation." "Fine, really." "Hannah," I said, "fine." That should have ended it. It did not. A week later, Megan called while I was driving home from class. She asked what I planned to wear. We talked about shoes. Then she said, "Mom is being weird about Saturday." I laughed. "Which Saturday?" "Graduation." "What kind of weird?" "She keeps asking what Caleb is wearing." I paused at a red light. "Maybe she wants pictures." "Maybe." Megan sounded distracted. I asked whether everything was okay between her and Caleb. She said yes. They had been together for almost 3 years. They had talked about getting married someday, but there was no official timeline. I knew that much. Megan had told me she did not want a giant public proposal. She wanted something personal. That detail came back to me later. At the time, I brushed the conversation aside. Mom liked pictures. Mom liked coordinating people. Mom liked knowing what everyone was wearing. None of that felt dangerous. It felt annoying. I was too close to graduation to waste energy on annoying. The week before the ceremony, Louis called me at work. He said he wanted to confirm the final head count. I told him 12. He hesitated. Then he asked, "And your mother is helping with decorations?" I sat up straighter. "No." There was another pause. "She stopped in yesterday." "For what?" "She said she was bringing a few things for the family." "What things?" "Some flowers, a box. She said you knew." I closed my office door. "I don't know about any box." Louis sounded embarrassed. "Do you want me to refuse anything she brings?" I almost said yes. I should have said yes. Instead, I made my first real mistake. I pictured Mom standing at the host desk with flowers and a smile. I pictured myself looking controlling over a few decorations. I heard her voice before she had even said anything. "Why does everything have to be such a big deal with you?" So I backed down. "Flowers are fine," I said. "Nothing that changes the room." "Understood." "And no extra guests." "Understood." After the call, I texted Mom. "Louis said you stopped by Bellini House." She answered almost immediately. "Just helping." "I don't need help." "I know." That's why I wanted to do something nice. "What did you bring?" "Nothing dramatic." "Mom." "Flowers, Hannah, breathe." I stared at that word. Breathe. Mom used it when she wanted to turn my objection into a personality flaw. If I pushed, I was tense. If I asked a second question, I was overthinking. If I set a limit, I was making things awkward. So I wrote, "Please do not change my reservation." She sent a heart. That heart bothered me more than an argument would have. On Friday night, the evening before graduation, Dad called. He asked whether I needed a ride to campus. I told him I was driving myself because I had to arrive early. Then he cleared his throat in that way he did when Mom had given him a message he did not want to deliver. "Your mother just wants tomorrow to go smoothly," he said. "So do I, she's excited." About my graduation, there was a pause. About all of it. I leaned against my kitchen counter. "What does all of it mean? You know your mother." "That is not an answer." He chuckled, but I did not. Dad had spent most of my life using humor as a fire exit. When Mom pushed too far, he did not defend the push. He defended the peace after it. "Hannah, don't go looking for trouble," he said. "I called you because you called me?" "I know." "Then tell me what I'm supposed to know." "Nothing. Forget I said anything." "Dad, have a good night, honey. We'll see you tomorrow." I slept badly. Not because I expected a disaster. I expected a nuisance. That distinction matters. I thought Mom might bring a centerpiece I hated. I thought she might make a long toast. I thought she might invite one extra couple and act surprised when I noticed. I did not think she would take the event itself. Graduation morning was bright and cool. I made coffee, put on a navy dress, and draped my gown over the passenger seat. My cap kept sliding off the box beside it. I laughed every time I turned a corner and heard it move. For once, I was not thinking about my family. I was thinking about finishing. At campus, I met two women from my program, Priya and Lauren. We had done almost every group assignment together. Priya had once joined a video call from the parking lot of her son's soccer practice. Lauren had written half a presentation while sitting in an airport. We had all built the degree around the rest of our lives. Seeing them in gowns made the work feel real. When my name was called, I heard my parents and Megan from somewhere behind me. Dad whistled. Mom yelled my name. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. For that moment, nothing was complicated. Afterward, we took photos on the lawn. Mom kept fixing the angle of my hood. Megan took better pictures than anyone else. Caleb carried my purse while I tried not to trip over my gown. Dad looked proud. I want to be fair about that. There were good moments that day. If the whole day had been bad, what happened later would have been easier to understand. Megan hugged me before we left campus. "You did it," she said. "So did you. You survived Mom taking 600 pictures." She laughed. Then she looked over my shoulder toward our mother. "Seriously, Hannah, I'm proud of you." "Thanks. I know you worked your butt off. That means a lot." She meant it. I believe that now. At the time, I was already on alert. I hated that I was measuring every kind word for hidden meaning. We had about an hour before dinner. I went home to change shoes and leave my gown. The diploma cover came with me. The actual diploma would arrive later, but the cover felt important enough. I put it in a slim navy folder with the program and a few cards from classmates. Then I drove to Bellini House. I arrived first. Louis was near the host's stand. He smiled when he saw the folder under my arm. "Graduate," he said. "Technically." "No, technically. Tonight you take the title." The private room looked exactly how I had wanted it. White tablecloths. Small glass vases with greenery. Warm lights. No giant banner. No balloon arch. No glitter. At the center of the long table sat the cream-colored tent card with its blue border. "Congratulations, Hannah." I touched the edge of it. It was silly how much I liked that card. It was not expensive. It was not personal in any deep way. But the room had one clear purpose. That little card said what the evening was for. Then I noticed two gold vases near the sideboard. They were not part of the restaurant decor. "Louis," he followed my eyes, "your mother brought those this afternoon. What is in the box under the table?" His face changed. I looked down. A white bakery box sat beneath the sideboard. "She said they were for later," he said. "I told her you had your own cake." Did she say what it is? It's a cake. I closed my eyes for a second. Louis, do not serve anything from that box unless I say yes. Of course. Even if my mother asks. Of course. He nodded toward the dining room. Do you want me to take them to the office? I almost said yes. Again, I should have. But guests were about to arrive, and I did not want to spend my graduation dinner policing a bakery box. Leave them there for now, I said. I'll deal with Mom. That was my second mistake. The first had been treating a boundary like a suggestion. The second was believing I would get a quiet moment to enforce it. Priya and Lauren arrived first. They brought one card between them because they said tuition had already taken enough from all of us. We laughed. My coworker Sam came next with her husband. Then Dad walked in carrying a bottle of wine for me to take home. Mom was behind him in a pale green dress. She kissed my cheek and told me I looked beautiful, then immediately asked where Megan was. As if summoned, Megan and Caleb came through the door. Megan wore a simple cream blouse and dark pants. Caleb had on a blazer. I saw Mom look him over from head to toe, then she gave him a tiny nod. There it was. Small, fast, easy to miss. I caught it. Caleb caught me catching it. His face went red. He looked away. My stomach tightened. I stepped toward him. Everything okay? Yeah. Really? Yeah, just nervous about dinner. Nobody is nervous about lasagna, I knew that. But before I could ask more, Mom slid between us. Hannah, where do you want your folder? In the empty chair beside me. That's a seat. For my things. What if somebody needs it? Who? She smiled too quickly. Nobody, I was asking. I looked at Dad. He was studying the wine list like it contained legal advice. Dinner started well. That is another detail I remember because the normal part lasted just long enough to lower my guard. We ordered. People asked about the ceremony. Priya told a story about our professor losing his microphone during our final presentation. Sam teased me about checking work email during finals week. Dad raised his glass. To Hannah, he said. She sets a goal and she gets there. I smiled. Thanks, Dad, Mom added, and she never needs anybody to push her. Everyone laughed lightly. I did too. The sentence landed where all her sentences landed, right between praise and permission to neglect me. For the first half hour, the room was mine. Then Mom checked her phone. She stood up. I'll be right back. A few minutes later, I heard voices in the hall, not one voice. Several. The door opened. A couple I recognized as Caleb's parents walked in. Behind them were 3 women around Megan's age, then another couple, then a man with 2 camera bodies hanging from his shoulders. I did not move. Megan did. Mom, she said. Her face went blank. What's happening? Mom clapped her hands once. Surprise. Caleb looked like he wanted the floor to open. His mother hugged Megan. One of the women squealed. The photographer began adjusting a lens. I stood. Mom, can I talk to you outside? Not now. Yes, now, she kept smiling. Hannah, please don't make this awkward. I stared at her. Who are these people? People who love your sister. This is my graduation dinner, and we're all together. Isn't that nice? There were now too many people for the room. The new guests hovered near the wall because there were not enough chairs. Louis appeared in the doorway. His eyes went from them to me. I gave him a look I hoped he understood. He stepped toward me. Do you want us to bring in another table? No, Mom answered at the same time. Yes. Louis looked at me. I said, no additional table yet. Mom's smile tightened. Hannah, outside. This time she followed me into the hall. Dad came too. He did not look happy. That gave me 1 second of hope. What is going on? I asked. Mom lowered her voice. Caleb is proposing tonight. I stared at her. Here? Yes, at my dinner. We're already together. You invited his parents and her friends without asking me. It's a proposal. They're not strangers. They are strangers to half the people in that room. Don't be dramatic. Dad touched my arm. Honey, it's already in motion. I pulled my arm back. You knew, he looked at the carpet. I knew this morning. This morning. Your mother thought it would be special. For whom? Mom exhaled sharply. Can you not do this tonight? I almost laughed. That is exactly what I'm asking you. She leaned closer. Caleb wanted family there. Megan deserves a beautiful memory. So do I. You have one. You graduated. I looked at her. She heard it. She knew how it sounded. Her face softened for half a second. Then the old logic returned. You get what I mean? I really don't. Behind us, the private room erupted in applause. Mom's eyes widened. Oh, no. She turned and hurried back inside. Caleb had started without her. I followed. He was standing near Megan with a ring box in his hand. Apparently, one of her friends had told him to just do it before the surprise got any stranger. Megan looked stunned. Caleb looked terrified. Nobody was looking at me. For a moment, I considered walking out. I could have taken my folder and left them all there. I did not, partly because Priya and Sam were still at the table, partly because I did not want my sister's proposal memory to become the story of me storming out. Mostly because I was still trying to be the reasonable one. Caleb got down on one knee. He said a few quiet things I could not hear. Megan started crying. Then she laughed and said yes. People cheered. I clapped. I did. I love my sister. Her happiness was not the thing hurting me. Mom rushed forward and hugged both of them. The photographer started taking pictures. Then Mom looked toward the center of the table. The little cream card was still there. She reached across Priya's place setting and picked it up. She handed it to our server. We don't need this anymore, she said. The room inside me went very still. The server looked at me. I held out my hand. Actually, I'll take it. Mom turned. Hannah, it's cluttering the table. It says what the dinner is for. She gave a little laugh. We know what it's for. Do we? Nobody spoke. The photographer lowered his camera. I took the card from the server and set it beside my navy folder. Then I sat down. Mom stared at me for a moment. I stared back. That should have been the point when she realized she had gone too far. Instead, she decided the problem was that I had noticed. After the proposal, the room rearranged itself around Megan. Caleb's parents moved closer, her friends crowded around the ring, and the photographer asked them to stand near the sideboard. My work friends became the outer edge of a party they had never agreed to attend. Priya glanced at me without asking whether I was okay. She only moved her water glass and stayed close. Some people know how to protect your dignity by not forcing you to explain it while everyone is watching. Mom was glowing. She started directing family photos and pointed to the empty chair beside me where I had left my Navy graduation folder. She wanted Caleb's mother to sit there. Nancy looked embarrassed and said she was fine standing. Mom insisted that a folder did not need its own chair. I picked it up and rested it on my lap. It held my program, cards from classmates, and the empty diploma cover that had felt important an hour earlier. Now it was being treated like something I should move so the real event could begin. Nancy leaned close and apologized. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. A server entered with a tray of champagne flutes. I knew I had not ordered them because the dinner package did not include alcohol. He stopped beside me and asked whether he should pour. I said no. Mom called across the room, "Yes, now is perfect." I looked at the server again. Not on my check. That was the first time I saw my mother's excitement turn into irritation. She came over and told me it was only a toast. I reminded her that I had not ordered champagne, and she said she had handled it. When I asked whose bill she had handled it on, she gave the answer as if it should settle everything. Your card is already here. The room got quiet in a way that made every glass seem too bright. My card was on file for the dinner I had booked. It was not a family account, and it was not permission to attach whatever Mom wanted to the evening. I told the server to hold the champagne until I spoke with Louis. He nodded and left before Mom could redirect him. She accused me of embarrassing Megan, but my sister answered before I could. She said I was not embarrassing her. Megan's face had changed. The ring was still on her hand, but the excitement had been replaced by a question. She asked Mom whether I had known about the proposal. Mom tried to answer around it, saying I would obviously be happy for her. Megan asked again. Did Hannah know? Nobody answered fast enough. Caleb finally said he had believed I knew because Mom had told him I wanted both families together and would be happy to share the evening. That was the first fact that changed the shape of the night. Until then, I knew Mom had taken over my dinner. Now I knew she had used my supposed approval to make everyone else comfortable doing it. Dad admitted he had learned about the proposal that morning because he thought Mom had already talked to me, which was what she had implied. Mom snapped that everyone was making a simple surprise sound dishonest. She kept returning to the result. Caleb had proposed, Megan had said yes, and we should all be happy. The result mattered to her more than the way she had produced it. I asked the guests I did not know to give us a few minutes. Caleb's parents agreed immediately and guided the others toward the bar. The photographer followed them. My invited guests could have stepped out too, but Priya and Sam stayed. They were not taking sides in a shouting match. They were simply refusing to leave me alone in my own dinner. Mom looked at them and asked whether I needed witnesses now. No, I said. I needed honesty before. The line was sharper than I intended, and she seized on the tone before she dealt with the point. She said I had been waiting all night to be offended. That accusation had worked on me for years because it made me review my own behavior instead of hers. Had I sounded cold? Had I asked too many questions? Had I made a moment awkward? This time the problem was visible. Extra guests were in the bar, champagne was waiting in the kitchen, and a bakery box sat under a sideboard. I told her I had been waiting for my graduation dinner. She said I had already had it. I looked at the plates that had not even been cleared and asked how dinner could already be over. Mom answered, "You know what I mean." I did. She meant the part centered on me had lasted long enough. Megan sat across from me and said she truly thought I had approved the proposal. I believed her. I also believed Caleb, who looked more embarrassed by the minute. My anger stayed where it belonged. The problem was not that my sister had accepted a ring. It was that my mother had treated my consent as something she could manufacture. Mom called the whole argument ridiculous and said nobody had stolen anything. "You stole the purpose of the night," I said. She rolled her eyes. That reaction hurt more than I expected because it showed how little she understood why the purpose mattered. When I told her I had asked for one dinner, she softened for a moment and said I had never needed that kind of attention. There it was again, dressed as praise. I was independent, practical, easy, and not interested in being fussed over. Those words had followed me through every family decision where someone else received the visible care, and I received credit for coping without it. When I asked who had decided I did not care about being celebrated, Mom said I had never acted as if I cared, which was true in the narrowest possible way. I had stopped asking for things after enough requests became negotiations. That was not the same as never wanting them. Dad apologized for not asking me about the proposal. Mom looked at him as if his apology were a betrayal. For most of my life, he had protected peace by refusing to challenge her once a plan was underway. His apology did not repair the night, but it changed one thing. I was no longer the only person saying a boundary had been crossed. For a few seconds, I thought we might actually stop there. We could separate the engagement from my dinner, let everyone breathe, and figure out the rest later. Then a server entered carrying a second cake. It was white with gold lettering that read she said yes. Megan closed her eyes. Caleb looked at the floor. I stared at Mom. The server asked whether he should bring it back, and Mom said no at the same moment I said yes. We had reached the point where even the staff knew there were two people claiming authority over one reservation. I asked Mom what else she had ordered. She dismissed the cake as a small thing, then dismissed the champagne, the flowers, and the extra guests one at a time. Each item sounded manageable when she isolated it. Together, they described a separate event. Megan asked the question I had been circling. "Mom, were you planning to put this on Hannah's card?" Mom did not answer directly. She said I was hosting and that families did not need to split every expense. My sister looked at her for a long moment and said, "She is hosting her graduation dinner. You made it something else." Mom's expression went cold. She told Megan she had spent months listening to her worry about whether Caleb would ever make a plan, and she had wanted one beautiful night for her. That motive was real. It was also incomplete. Wanting something beautiful for one daughter did not explain why the other daughter had to finance the stage. Megan pointed at the cream card beside my folder and reminded Mom that she had physically removed my name from the center of the table. Mom called it one little sign. Megan answered that it was the sign saying what the night was for. For the first time, somebody else described the injury without needing me to translate it. Mom accused me of turning my sister against her. I answered too sharply and told her I did not control Megan, which might be why Megan trusted me. The second I said it, I knew I had aimed to hurt. I apologized for the sentence, but I refused to let that apology absorb the rest of the conflict. "My part is one mean sentence," I told her. "I'm not taking your part too." The server was still holding the engagement cake, so I asked him to keep it in the kitchen while we sorted out the bill. Mom grabbed her purse and said that if money was all I cared about, she would pay for the cake. I said, "Good." She stopped because she expected me to rush in and make her offer unnecessary. I did not. Before she could leave, Louis appeared in the doorway with a slim black folder. He looked from Mom to me and asked whether we could speak privately. Mom tried to answer for me, saying we were dealing with a family matter. Louis looked at me instead. I stood and followed him into the hall. He apologized before he explained anything. The restaurant had received more changes to my reservation than he had realized, and his staff had accepted them because they believed my mother was coordinating with me. I already knew about flowers. I did not know she had come to the restaurant twice and called more than once. Louis said Mom had described an engagement celebration that would begin after my main course. The staff had written a room reset into the event notes. My graduation card would come down, the blue dessert plates would be replaced, gold accents would go out, and the second cake would be served. I stared at him. This had not been an impulsive proposal tucked into dinner. Mom had planned a second event inside the first one, complete with a moment when my part would officially end. I asked why nobody had confirmed those changes with me. Louis did not dodge the question. They should have, and they had not. Mom knew the menu, head count, cake timing, and parking details because I had forwarded her the confirmation email 2 weeks earlier. She had enough information to sound like a coordinator. Louis told me he had stopped all additional service once he understood there was a dispute. He also separated the charges in the restaurant system. My original graduation dinner on one check and every later engagement request on another. The second group included extra meals, the champagne, upgraded flowers, the additional cake service, and extra time in the private room. The added total was close to $2,000, and I had spent months budgeting for my own dinner while Mom nearly doubled the evening without asking me. I asked whether those additions would have landed on the card I had left for my original balance. Louis looked uncomfortable and said yes, if nobody had caught the problem before closing. Then he said the sentence I needed to hear from the business, not from my family. That should not have happened. He handed me a printed summary with 2 sections. One showed what I had authorized. The other showed what Mom had requested later. I did not need a complicated policy or a legal argument. I needed one plain distinction. My name was on the first agreement. My permission was not on the second set of purchases. Louis asked how I wanted to proceed. I looked at the closed dining room door and felt the old reflex rise again. I could pay part of the extra cost, call it compromise, and clean up the feelings tomorrow. That was how I had kept peace for years. Then I looked at the 2 sections on the page. For once, the boundary was already printed in front of me. I asked Louis for 2 minutes and stayed in the hallway with the printed summary. My first instinct was still to minimize the damage. I could pay for a few extra meals, make Mom cover the cake, and pretend the rest was too small to fight about. That was the old version of peace. I absorbed part of the cost, swallowed part of the anger, and everybody called the result compromise. The page in my hand made that habit look ridiculous. 1 section was mine, 1 section was not. When I returned to the private room, everyone looked at me. The extra guests were still near the bar, my friends were at the table, and Megan stood beside Caleb with her ring hand pressed against her other palm. Mom waited by the sideboard as if she expected me to come back with a smaller problem. I walked to my chair first. The cream-colored card was still beside my navy folder, so I placed it upright in the center of the table again. Mom watched me do it. Then I laid the printed summary next to the card. Dad asked what Louis had wanted. I told him the restaurant had separated my original dinner from the engagement additions. Mom immediately called the second total just the extra party things, as if a vague label would make the number harmless. I looked directly at her. "Did you expect my card to pay for them?" She said she expected us to settle everything like a family. I asked again. This time she said my card was already on file and she had planned to reimburse me for some of the difference. That word did more work than the rest of her sentence. Dad asked how much the engagement portion cost. Mom told him not to worry about it. Megan stepped closer and said, "I want to know too." Mom told her to enjoy being engaged instead of getting involved in a bill. Megan answered, "It is my engagement. That makes me involved." Dad looked at Mom and admitted she had told him the restaurant part was already handled. He had carried the bakery box inside that afternoon because he believed I had agreed to the plan. When he realized handled meant my card, his expression changed. Mom looked around the table and said everyone was treating her like a thief. I did not call her one. I said, "You made purchases with my payment method in mind, and you did it after I told you not to change my reservation." She said she had never heard me forbid an engagement. I reminded her that she had never told me there would be one. That was how she argued when a boundary became inconvenient. She ignored the obvious meaning and searched for a technical gap. If I had not named every possible violation in advance, she treated the missing sentence as permission. Louis entered when I asked him to come back. He stayed near the door and explained only the restaurant's role. The original agreement was in my name. The later requests had come from Mom, and the staff had accepted them because they believed she was acting with my approval. He admitted that the restaurant should have confirmed those changes with me. Mom seized on the word misunderstanding. She said that was all this had been. Louis did not argue with her. He simply added that she had told his event coordinator I knew about the engagement plan. Caleb spoke before Mom could answer. "That's what you told me too." He said he had asked twice whether proposing during my graduation dinner would be rude. Mom had told him I wanted both families together and that I hated being the center of attention anyway. I felt an old ache under my anger. That description was so familiar that it almost sounded like my own voice. I had repeated versions of it myself. "I don't need a fuss. I'm fine. Do whatever works." I had learned to say those things because they made disappointment easier to survive. Louis said Mom had used similar language with the restaurant. According to the event note, the staff was supposed to remove the graduation setup after the main course because I was not sentimental about that stuff. The cream card stood between us while he said it. I asked Mom whether she truly believed that being practical meant I did not care. Her face softened, but only for a moment. She said I had never been the daughter who needed a big production. "I didn't ask for a big production," I said. "I asked you not to erase the small one I planned." Megan looked at the printed summary, then at the card. She asked whether Mom had really told the restaurant to remove all the graduation items before the engagement photos. Mom said the room needed to look consistent. Megan asked, consistent with what? Mom had no graceful answer. Louis opened the black folder and confirmed the reset instructions. The center card would come down, the dessert setup would change, and the engagement cake would replace mine after the original meal. Dad stared at Mom. He had known about the proposal, but not about the planned erasure of everything tied to my graduation. Megan's face went pale with anger. You wanted the pictures to look like this was my party from the start. Mom said that was not what she meant. Megan asked what else the instructions could mean. Then my sister took off the engagement ring. Caleb's expression changed, but Megan caught his hand immediately. She told him she was not rejecting him. She simply did not want the ring on her hand while they were arguing about a celebration built on a lie. He nodded and said he understood. Mom looked at me. Now look what you've done. The room became silent. That sentence contained the whole pattern. She made the plan. She told the lie. Megan removed the ring. Somehow the consequence still belonged to me because I had refused to make it disappear. I did not raise my voice. I didn't take her ring off. Mom said I had made the night ugly by refusing to let one happy thing happen without turning it into a grievance. I reminded her that I had congratulated Megan, stayed for the proposal, and asked only to keep charges I never approved off my card. Mom shook her head. You always have to make a point. No, I said. I finally have to make a choice. That was the moment I stopped trying to win her agreement. I did not need her to admit that my feelings were reasonable before I could protect my money. I did not need a unanimous family vote before my reservation belonged to me. Megan asked Mom why she had used my dinner instead of booking a separate engagement party. Mom tried to say the timing had worked out. Megan waited. Dad waited. Even Mom seemed to realize that another vague answer would not survive the room. Finally, she said the private room was already booked. Caleb wanted to propose that weekend. His parents were available. Megan's closest friends could make it. Mom had promised herself that her younger daughter would have a beautiful engagement memory, and my reservation solved every practical problem at once. There, she said, is that what everybody wanted to hear? Nobody answered right away. The truth was not dramatic. It was worse because it was ordinary. My room was available. My deposit was paid. My menu was set. My card was on file. I had already done the hard part, so Mom treated the result as a family resource. Dad told her she could have asked me. Mom snapped that I would have said no. I said yes, and that answer would have mattered. She accused me of preferring an empty room to sharing something with my sister. I reminded her that Megan had been invited from the beginning. Sharing would have meant asking me to add a celebration. What Mom had done was decide that my celebration could be removed once it became useful. Mom pointed toward the Navy folder and said nobody could take my degree away from me. I looked at Megan. Nobody could take away the fact that Caleb loves her either. That doesn't mean the proposal didn't deserve its own moment. Mom stopped. I told her celebration was not a limited resource. She did not need to make Megan smaller in order to honor me, and she did not need to make me smaller in order to honor Megan. She had chosen the second option because she believed I would tolerate it. Mom's eyes flashed. I believed you would care more about your sister than a dinner. I do care more about her than dinner. Then why are we still doing this? Because you keep pretending those are the only two choices. I touched the edge of the cream card. I can love Megan and still want my name to stay on the night I planned. Mom looked away. Then I said the sentence I had been trying to say for years. I paid for one night where my life wasn't the opening act for hers. Nobody moved. The line did not make me feel triumphant. It made me feel tired because I could hear how long I had needed it. Mom's face changed first. She looked hurt. I almost rushed in to soften it, and that reflex surprised me with its strength. Then I remembered the printed summary. I turned to Louis. "Please close my check for the original graduation dinner," he nodded, "and remove my card from every engagement charge." He said he could do that immediately. Mom stepped forward. "Hannah, wait." I kept my eyes on Louis. "Anything added after my agreement needs a different payment method." Understood. That was my irreversible action. I did not leave the decision hanging until tomorrow. I did not promise to work out reimbursement later. I removed the one thing that had made Mom's plan possible without my consent: access to my payment. The consequence appeared at once. Louis asked whether the engagement service should continue, because the second check now required another card before the extra food, champagne, cake, and room extension could be released. Dad asked for the total. When Louis told him it was close to $2,000, Dad stared at Mom. She reminded him that the amount included extra meals and time in the room. He said that was exactly the point. Those were things she had ordered. For once, Dad did not search for a sentence that would make both sides stop talking. He looked at me and said he had helped carry the cake because he believed I had approved the plan. Then he apologized without adding an excuse. I thanked him. Mom asked whether everyone had decided she was the villain. "No," I said. "You're the person who made this decision." She said that sounded like the same thing. "It isn't. I don't need you to be a monster. I need you to be responsible." That landed differently. Her anger did not vanish, but the argument lost some of its heat. Louis asked again whether the engagement service should continue. I did not answer for Mom. That choice belonged to the person who had ordered it. She looked toward Megan. My sister still held the ring in her palm, and Caleb stood beside her without trying to put it back. For the first time all night, Mom looked less angry than afraid. She had wanted to create a perfect memory and had finally seen what the shortcut had cost. "I wanted you to have something beautiful," she told Megan. Megan answered quietly. "Then why did Hannah have to lose something?" Mom said she honestly thought I would not care. Megan said, "You decided she wouldn't." Mom looked at me then. For once, she did not say I was overreacting. She did not say I was difficult. She did not say I could handle it. She opened her purse. Dad reached for his wallet, but she stopped him. She took out her own card and handed it to Louis. "Put the added charges on this." Louis accepted it without drama. He said he would bring the receipt back for her review, then left the room. The shift in power was almost boring. No judge arrived. Nobody applauded. No stranger gave a speech about family. My mother's purchases moved onto my mother's card. That was all, and it was everything. For years, my ability to absorb a problem had been part of her planning. If I could afford the cost, rearrange the schedule, or recover from the disappointment, then she treated the damage as manageable. This time, the cost stayed attached to the decision that created it. Mom asked whether I was satisfied. I told her no. She looked almost offended by that answer because she assumed the money had been my only complaint. I told her what I wanted now. I wanted my graduation dinner to finish as my graduation dinner. The engagement guests could return after we were done, and the second party could continue on the check she had just opened. Mom stared at the cream card. "So that stays up?" "Yes. For how long?" "Until my dinner is over." Priya hid a smile behind her napkin. I almost laughed too. Mom sat down, not gracefully, but she sat. For the next 40 minutes, something stranger than the argument happened. We finished dinner. The engagement guests waited near the bar while the new check was settled. Dad asked about my final project. Priya described the week. I nearly dropped a class because work had exploded. Megan asked questions about the program that she had never thought to ask before. The cream card stayed in the middle of the table. When my graduation cake came out, the dark blue letters were exactly right. "Congratulations, Hannah." Mom looked at the cake, then at me. She did not turn the moment into a speech. She only said, "Congratulations." I wanted one word to repair more than it could. It did not. Still, For the first time that evening, she had let my moment exist without adding anything to it. When the plates were cleared, I stood and thanked the people I had invited. I did not explain the bill or make a speech about my mother. I talked about school because that was why those people had come. I thanked Priya and Lauren for dragging me through group projects when I was exhausted, and I thanked Sam for covering one brutal work week so I could finish a paper. Dad had shown up for the ceremony, so I thanked him for that too. Then I looked at Megan. "Thank you for being happy for me before tonight got complicated," I said. She hugged me and whispered that she really was sorry. I told her she did not owe me our mother's apology. That distinction mattered. For years, Mom's choices had created tension between us, and Megan and I had often handed that tension back to each other. I did not want to keep doing that. Caleb apologized too. He admitted that he should have checked with me even after Mom said I approved the plan. I told him I understood why he had believed her. Then I added, "Next time, check with the person whose name is on the cake." He laughed, and the sound broke some of the tension. Dad walked me toward the front door while Mom stayed in the private room. The engagement guests were beginning to come back. The gold cake waited on the sideboard, and the champagne could finally be poured. It could become Megan's celebration now because it was no longer pretending to be mine. At the host stand, Louis handed me my receipt. It showed only the original dinner, exactly as we had agreed. He also returned the cream tent card and apologized again for letting the later changes through without confirming them with me. I thanked him for correcting the mistake. He said the restaurant was changing how event updates were approved, and that was enough for me. Dad followed me to my car. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he admitted that he had known about the proposal that morning and should have warned me. He had told himself the plan was already too far along to challenge. That was his favorite reason for avoiding a conflict, and he finally seemed to hear what it sounded like from the other side. If he decided something was too uncomfortable to stop, the discomfort did not disappear. It simply landed on someone else later. He apologized again. I believed him, but believing an apology did not erase the pattern. It only meant I did not have to pretend the apology was fake in order to keep my boundary. 3 days later, Megan came to my apartment after work with takeout and no flowers. I appreciated the absence of decorations. The engagement ring was back on her finger, and she told me she and Caleb had sat on their balcony the next evening and talked without either family present. He had asked whether she still wanted to marry him when nobody else was arranging the answer. She had said yes. We ate on my couch and talked directly about our family for the first time in years. Megan said Mom had often described me as someone who did not care about birthdays, gifts, or attention. I told her the truth was less flattering to everyone. I had stopped asking after enough plans became negotiations. I had assumed Megan knew how often Mom redirected time and attention toward her. She knew some of it, but not all. Sometimes she had believed I stayed distant because I did not want to be included. That hurt in a quiet way. We had spent years letting somebody else explain us to each other. "Maybe we stop doing that," Megan said. I agreed. Then she admitted she had hated the gold engagement cake. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my fork. It was the first time the whole night felt like something my sister, and I might eventually remember without standing on opposite sides of it. Mom did not call me that week. Normally, her silence would have made me anxious enough to send a harmless text and reopen the door myself. This time, I let the silence belong to her. A week later, she sent a short message. She said she understood that I needed space, and she apologized for changing my dinner without asking. It was not a perfect apology. It did not mention every lie or every charge, and it did not erase the years behind one night. But it named an action instead of describing my reaction. I thanked her and gave her one clear rule. Any future plan involving my time, money, or name had to be discussed with me before she committed me to it. Several hours passed before she answered with one word. Understood. I did not ask whether she really meant it. Future behavior could answer that better than another conversation. Over the next few months, something small changed. Mom started asking more often instead of announcing. When she wanted to add relatives to Dad's birthday dinner, she asked the person who had made the reservation. When she offered my help during Megan's move, my sister corrected her before I had to. "Hannah can decide that," Megan said. Mom looked annoyed, then asked me. I said no because I was working that weekend. Nobody collapsed. Nobody stopped speaking to me. The move happened without my rescue. That may sound like a tiny victory, and it was. Tiny victories are how a boundary becomes ordinary instead of dramatic. My degree did not transform my career the next Monday. There was no magical promotion and no giant announcement. The first change was quieter. I stopped treating my own wants as optional just because I could survive without them. I had spent years confusing resilience with permission. Being capable did not mean I had to be the flexible one every time. Being independent did not mean asking for less made me mature. Family peace was not something I was required to buy with small pieces of myself. The night after Megan visited, I finally unpacked my graduation folder. I put the program in a drawer and set the empty diploma cover on the bookshelf, ready for the real diploma when it arrived. Then, I found the cream tent card Lewis had returned to me. The blue border had a small bend in one corner and a faint watermark sat near the bottom. It was not important enough to frame. I framed it anyway. I placed it beside the diploma cover. "Congratulations, Hannah." For once, I let the words stay exactly where they belonged.